Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's live session of the Web3 and Crypto Basics Trading Bootcamp that we've been running. And tonight is about your Web3 basics that you definitely need to know if you want to learn to trade crypto. This has been a pilot program that we have launched for an 8-week program where we're coming to you live, where we're building out an LMS for you, where we're going to have an abundance of different types of educational programs for you coming soon. And this is in partnership with EvolvH3R, Jana Crypto Queen, All Things Blockchain, Insightful. If you have come across this recording or you have found it some way or shape or form and you haven't signed up for the education app, you can go ahead, sign up, and you can have access to all of the recordings. And we eventually will have a whole bunch of short courses in there for you. So go ahead, even if you were not here for the live session, which we have a whole bunch of students that are on the call and they've been turning up every single week, you can keep learning and you can start at any time. So tonight, what are we going to talk about? We are going to talk about how to buy crypto and keep it safe. So this is week 4 of our live session, but if you're watching the recording, this would be week 4 of your on-demand home lesson because anybody can learn. You do not have to be here for the live sessions. So if you did miss the session, not a problem. As I mentioned, you can go ahead and sign up. Now, when you sign up to that, you're going to get an email, you get a welcome email, and then inside of that, you'll have to create an account, and then you'll get access. And inside of there, you have access to all of the recordings and the different quizzes and everything that we're doing. And as time develops, we'll be building out some more educational programs for you. Now, warning, if you're new, if you found this, if this is your first session, I know a lot of you that have been on the call, so a little bit repetitive if you've been here since the first week. I recommend that you maybe come a few minutes late because it's going to be a bit repetitive, but I like to make sure that if this is your first lesson, if you've just joined us, it doesn't matter. You don't have to learn them in chronological order, but I like to warn everybody that it's information overload, okay? And especially if you are joining a little bit further along, we may have covered some topics that you don't know, but that's fine. You're going to go back. Honestly, I had to watch a million YouTube videos to get the amount of knowledge that I have now. Very interactive program. You can go inside the group. You can ask us questions. You can ask questions throughout. We'll do polls. There's quizzes, etc. So we're really here just to provide you the platform and help you learn, but it's really up to you to interact with the program. Now, lastly, I like to be safe and make sure that we remind everyone to be mindful of scammers, particularly in Web3, but definitely in the digital economy, especially with AI these days. So you can never be too safe. It's always very careful. Romance scams, crypto scams, it doesn't matter. We went through last week a lot of different tips and tricks. We will be, or my goal is to actually build more in-depth courses on these particular topics, right? So in the boot camp, we just talk about, okay, here's quickly things like, kind of warning, this is this and then this, but we could do a whole like 8 lessons on how you could stay safe, and we could bring in cybersecurity experts, and we could, we could go down this whole rabbit hole of teaching you how to be safe and identify scams, right? So you're not going to learn everything in 8 weeks, okay? So I like to give you the analogy, if you have a lot of weight to lose, are you going to lose it in 8 weeks? No. Okay. Now you're like, how have you kind of gone down that when you're talking about scammers? Is just be careful, because as you go down this rabbit hole of learning in this Web3 crypto industry, there's just more scammers and there's more rug pulls, and because everybody can just kind of like create a token. So I just really like to hammer it home. We're going to provide you the education. We're going to give you an opportunity to learn, but please just be really careful. All right, disclaimer, education purposes only. We are not financial advisors. I'm not recommending that you buy cryptocurrency, especially today when we talk about how to buy crypto and how to keep it safe. Do I own crypto? Yes. Have I done a lot of my own research? Yes. When I started, did I know how to? No. I'm quite passionate about helping other people learn. How do you start doing your own research? And there's information overload out there. So how can I streamline it for you to know what you need to know when you need to know it? Okay. So you don't need to know on a deep technical level how cryptography works, but you do need to know how to keep it safe and what's the difference and how to identify a good project from a bad project, how to identify a dodgy exchange from a good exchange. And always this content is recorded and it is shared for you inside of the platform. So at any point, if you're on the bootcamp and you're here live and you want to go back and watch it, you've got that opportunity. So it will always be made available for you in the platform. Now, before we jump into today's lesson, I want to talk about events. So all things blockchain. So as I mentioned at the start, we didn't go into too much depth into all things blockchain and Evolver because we've done that in the first week. Go back and watch that if you want to learn more about us. We do a whole new intro, but we host a lot of events, okay? And so we've got a few coming up. Now, a lot of our events are online. So we've got two, our in-person event, which is a hybrid. So we have it here in Brisbane with OKX, and it's also live streamed. And then we have our AMA, which is 100% online. And then we're also doing an event at Token 49. So if you want to stay up to date with all things blockchain, you can go ahead and register to their Luma calendar, then EvolvH3R, okay, which is also one of the other community partners, a part of this initiative in this educational program. We're also hosting some events at Token 49, and we also host online events. Now, our online events are a little bit different. They are an online networking and a fireside chat. So we bring in somebody to share a bit of our story, and then this week we have Paula from Hashlock, who is going to be sharing her story about how she got into Web3. And what I love about it is that Hashlock's her first job in Web3, but she kind of came from a project management role and she had this, hunger to learn. And now she's learning about smart contracts. And I found it quite inspiring how to hear people's different stories. She hasn't bought any crypto. She hasn't invested in crypto. Now she probably has. But my point is, if we're going to hear her story about how she got into it and how she is working in the Web3 industry. And then we break out into different breakout rooms where you network with 3 to 4 different people online. So we have these in-person events like Token 49, and we're going to be at the Australian Crypto Convention. And it's great to come together and network, in person. And I recommend it. It's one of the next steps, especially if you haven't started going to local networking and community events. But sometimes it's not always possible. Maybe you live in a rural area. Maybe you're on the other side of the world. How do you, maybe you just want to expand your network. So how do you do that? So we've created these online networking events. Now they are female focused. Now all of our events at EvolvH3R are open for everyone and we invite everyone. I always say to the guys that are like, oh, that's a women's event. I'm like, no, it's a women's focused event. I was like, do you have a wife? Do you have a daughter? Do you have a sister? Do you have a neighbor? Do you have a grandma? Do you have any type of woman that is in your life that maybe you want to educate them more on Web3, or maybe they would want more support? Then you can bring them or you can come with them. It's just about a space that is about empowering women and giving them an opportunity. But more so, in the male-dominated industry, a lot of the times, I know a lot of women where it's them and a team of guys. I found myself in Bahrain at a table of 13 men. Okay, so it's nice, even though I can work in a team that's all males, it's nice to connect with other females. So it's about bringing women together and being able to kind of connect in these male-dominated industries. And if you haven't been playing the game, I know that a few of you are. Lynn, I saw that you've just come in. Hello, welcome. Let's jump on afterwards. I know that you had some questions about it. Us as a team here at EvolvH3R and all things blockchain, we have been learning this platform. It is a new platform for us, and there's some limitations with the gamification elements that we have in the weird way that they calculate the points. But nonetheless, we are giving away prizes for those that are engaged, those that are being active, and there's tons of you that are in the bootcamp that are doing that. So the good news is that if you're watching this recording or you've just landed here somehow, you can still enter the game, because the game is about your effort. So if you do all of the quizzes, you fill out the forms. So we've just introduced feedback forms. You'll see at the bottom of the email. If you fill that in, you get points. If you do the quizzes, you get points. So even if you've come in now at like week 4 or even week 5 or onwards, if you're super dedicated, like you study for an exam, you could also still win, okay? So it's learn to earn, and we've got some good prizes up for grabs. So I'm not going to hammer on too much about this. We're up to week 4, okay? And then in the second half of the week, we go a little bit deeper. I'm excited to say I didn't actually share it in the events tonight because I didn't want to waffle on too much, but we've got some guest speakers coming up for week 6 and week 7, talking about topics that I know the basics about, but I want to bring in experts to help teach people a little bit more in depth about those topics. And then we'll finish it off with dollar cost averaging, because I think that's super important. And dollar cost averaging, if you don't know what it is, we're going to unpack that in week 8. Tonight, we're going to talk about how do you buy crypto. Now, I am pretty confident that a majority of the people that are in this bootcamp, because we discovered it at the start, that you've already kind of dabbled or played in this space. If you're coming across this and you haven't, this is going to be the video for you. So you've heard about it, somebody's talked about it, you're like, hey, you can buy different cryptocurrencies, and they ask you, where do I buy it? How do I buy it? And they ask you, what should I buy? All right. I am not a financial advisor. If you ask me what I am currently investing in, I'll be honest with you, but you always have to do your own research, okay? Crypto, I have made some good returns and I've made some bad returns. I made some good decisions, bad decisions. So there are different types of crypto or different ways, that you can buy cryptocurrency, and we're going to unpack those. So there's centralized exchanges and then there's decentralized exchanges. And the irony is that in today's world, we really need the centralized exchanges to be able to be our on-ramp into decentralized world. And we're going to unpack that. And there is a huge problem with blockchain, not just cryptocurrency, blockchain. Remember that they're different, that until we have a whole ecosystem that is operating in a decentralized way, and you're getting paid in crypto and you're spending in crypto and you're doing all of that, we need an on-ramp, okay? And we're going to unpack that today. So what are the differences between centralized and decentralized exchanges? That's what we're going to talk about. Before we jump into that, just out of curiosity of the students that are in the room, who here has used a decentralized exchange before? Just put a Y for yes or an N for no in the chat. Okay, not sure. And we've got a couple of yeses, we've got a couple of no's. So we have a good mix. So for those of you that have used haven't used a decentralized exchange, have you used a centralized exchange before? Yes, no, or not sure. If you've bought crypto, you've had to have used one way, unless you did peer-to-peer, that is possible. And I have done a peer-to-peer transaction. They're just very rare. Okay, got a couple yeses. Well, let's unpack it. So what are centralized exchanges? These are going to be the most common way that most people enter into the crypto ecosystem. So they are operated by a central authority, which is why I say that it's a bit of an irony, where we're talking about blockchain, which is decentralization, and how we're supposed to remove these central authorities and these people that are in the middle. But really, we use these centralized exchanges to on-ramp into the decentralized world. But there are pros and cons to this. They provide these safeguards, or they're supposed to, but they're supposed to be the active middleman. So I think of them as modern banks, right? Because they're not your commonwealths. They're not your, Bank of Hong Kong, but they're still the way that we are transacting to be able to play in the decentralized world. Now, it's also a way that makes it easy for people to onboard into the ecosystem. They generally have easy user interfaces, they have apps. A lot of them provide you charts. I know a lot of you are doing the crypto trading with Renee and you're learning the Bybit platform. I am not a trader. Every time I go into any type of trading platform like Bybit or any of the ones that are made for traders, it's kind of like when I log into the back office of this platform. Like, it's just not me. Like, I need something kind of really simple and easier user interface, and they kind of allow this to make it easier for people to onboard. They also provide a lot of liquidity. Actually, I know I went to the, oops. Sorry, folks. I tried to just go back one spot. They provide liquidity, and we're not going to jump too much into liquidity and that side of things in terms of like decentralized exchanges and how you can identify a good centralized exchange. We are going to talk a little bit about that, but they basically allow, so obviously somebody has to be willing to sell and to buy. So the amount of liquidity, and then when you get into decentralized exchanges, which we'll talk about in a moment, it becomes more risky. So when you're using a centralized exchange, generally they have to provide this information. A lot of them will provide you proof of reserves. They'll say, listen, like, we have this much Bitcoin on hand, or we have this much crypto, or we have this much. So it's a little bit safer sometimes when you're trading, and you're not going to kind of like get rug pulled, which might happen on a decentralized exchange. Also, built-in services and protections. So a lot of the times, depending on the exchange that you're using, they'll have good customer support. Decentralized exchanges, they don't have that. We'll talk about that. KYC and AML, we'll talk about that in a moment, so I'm not going to dive too deep into that. Sorry, I'm getting tongue twisted today. But know that with centralization is supposed to come this bit of safety. So I always say to people, what's your risk tolerance? If you want more freedom and you want to be your own bank and you want to own your own crypto and be in control of it, well, there's risks that come with that. There's also risks that come with centralized exchanges, and we're going to talk about it in a moment. But in a general sense, especially now, maybe not so much a couple of years ago, and as everybody on this call heard of FTX, if you've been in the space for a while, and even if you're new, I'm sure that you've come across it. FTX is like the biggest use case of like how a centralized exchange, which was supposed to be safe, wasn't safe. And if you haven't heard about it, please go watch a video on FTX. It's out of the scope of this video, but generally they're supposed to be safe. Now, what happens, there's a theory that apparently he did it for the greater good. I don't know. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but now there maybe centralized exchanges are a little bit more. We're trying to weed out the bad ones, but just because they're a centralized exchange doesn't necessarily mean that they're safe. Okay, so please do your due diligence. Now, us as communities, all things blockchain, Jana, EvolvH3R, we've been in the space for a while, so we generally know the ones that are quite trustworthy. But I also know people that it had money in FTX as well. So sometimes you just don't know who the bad actors are. But please, just, even though they're supposed to be a little bit safe, they're not always. And then you've got your fiat on-ramp and off-ramps. Now, this is where if you want to buy crypto, back in the day, and I've only done one, no, okay, I've done two peer-to-peer transactions. And little side story, I didn't actually realize the significance of my onboarding into crypto to now when I look at it. So the person that onboarded me into crypto, I actually had an online business with. It was my first online business. It was a network marketing business, and he kind of like mentored me, and then he told me about crypto, and then he was like, okay. I was like, yeah, I'm in, because I have a bit of a high risk tolerance. I was like, I think I was like, I'm going to throw in, $1,000. And he's like, okay, but you got to get a ledger. And so I ordered the ledger. It came in the box. Once I got the ledger, I set it up. I transferred him $1,000, and then he transferred me the Bitcoin. And I still have that Bitcoin today on my ledger. That was my very first purchase into crypto, which was like this peer-to-peer transaction. I didn't buy it from an exchange, and that was back in 2017. And now that I look back on it, I was like, wow, like my first transaction into crypto was like truly peer-to-peer. The second peer-to-peer transaction that I had, I actually gave somebody cash, and they sent me the Ethereum. Okay, so very rare though. And today, to find peer-to-peer transactions, not that I've gone looking, I think that they would be quite hard, and you would definitely need to be kind of like submerged into the ecosystem, and you would have to find somebody that has a lot of crypto that wants to sell it for cash. So most people, they will need a centralized exchange if they want to play in the decentralized world. So say there's a token, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, that you come across that maybe is not on your centralized exchange, and you have to buy it off a decentralized exchange. Well, how do you get money on there? Most of the time, you have to put money on. So these are where the benefits of the centralized exchanges come into play. So KYC stands for Know Your Customer. We're not going to talk about KYB today, because that's a little bit more about the entrepreneurial side, but that's Know Your Business. So if you're a startup or you're a business or somebody that wants to get into this space, it's basically just having the same kind of accreditations to prove who you are. So everybody, the government, the banks, they still want to know. They're cracking down. Side note, do you know what I learned this week? I know I asked at the start of the class, did anybody learn anything this week, or if there was any piece of news? I learned something that was very disheartening about the Web3 ecosystem, and that USDT can block wallets from doing transactions. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into the technicality of it, because it's way out of the scope of this video. But just for those of you that might be a little bit, maybe a little bit more kind of crypto savvy, and that you're not a complete beginner, we need to communicate just like with the internet. So if we want to send transactions, we need to communicate to the nodes, right? So we talk about these nodes, and we talk about these peer-to-peer networks, and then we use the internet, right? And the internet, even though it's like this decentralized infrastructure, it's also very centralized infrastructure. And then you have to use these nodes, these RCP nodes, that basically allow you to communicate, right? And then, so what they're doing apparently, and this was, it blew my mind, that only apparently USDT does this, can't confirm it, but basically what they do is when you call to kind of like do the transaction to speak to the blockchain, they block it. I'm like, isn't that the whole point, right? So why am I telling you this story, and why is that disheartening? Is because we all know that banks and the governments, they want to know, they want to control everything, etc. But then there's also supposed to be a safety element. Okay, so are they laundering money? So the particular story of how I discovered that is somebody reached out to me and said, I don't understand. I can't send my money, and it's quite a substantial amount of money in there. And the wallet, whoever sent him the money, apparently that wallet address was connected to money laundering. So this person that has the money in their wallet, they can't actually transfer the money out, even though it's in a Web3 wallet, which we're going to talk about in a moment. So that was my biggest learning today. And I share that with you because every day, every week, we need to help educate each other on a peer-to-peer way, because I never knew that USDT. And then I messaged my girlfriend who's in cybersecurity, and she goes, yeah, most people don't know that USDT can block it. I said to the guy, I'm like, well, just import your seed phrases, because I thought that they were doing it at the wallet level, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So I know I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but I think this is a really important thing, because the reason why they do KYC is to make sure people aren't laundering money or criminals aren't using it for bad things, the same way that they try to do that with, cash. And these centralized exchanges have the requirement to know who all of their customers are. Now, obviously, the government wants their tax, but then we also want to make sure that we're not facilitating criminal activity. I'm going to come to some of the questions in just a second. Decentralized exchanges do not require KYC, which is like the essence of what decentralization is all about. But then we have to ask ourselves, okay, great, if we have decentralization, how are we putting safety measures and protections? And not that I want to go on too much of a tangent, but also what are we doing in the Web2 world? How are we, monitoring criminals? And when you actually start to unpack and understand blockchain technology, and somebody wrote, I made a comment, and they're like, USDT is actually like the criminals would be dumb to almost use it, because it's like the best way to track it. Because any money, if you take from a centralized exchange and you transfer and you on-ramp, it's all traceable. So if you do anything, and it's all traceable onto the blockchain. So it's kind of like this irony. But I know I've kind of gone on a bit of a tangent. I'm going to go over to the question. So does that mean our Bybit accounts should hold funds in anything other than USDT? No. So what it means is it's not that, okay, so if you're trading, that's actually a really good question. What about USDC? I got the feeling it was going to be overregulated. Good question. I don't know, Martin. I haven't had the chance because I'm so busy organizing like 4 side events at Token 49 and building out the education platform to go and do a dig deep. I did ask my girlfriend, I'm like, is this just USDT or is this all protocols? And she just said USDT. But Nick, if you're using USDT in a platform like Bybit, or if you're using it as a way of trading, that is perfectly fine. What I'm talking about, and we're going to unpack it actually as we go through, so it might actually make a little bit more sense as we go through it. But when you have a Web3 wallet, which we're going to talk about in a moment, so this person has their money in a Web3 wallet, which he has the seed phrases for, which he should be 100% full control of. And even though he doesn't have the seed phrases and his money sitting there, what they're doing is they haven't taken the assets, but they're blocking the transaction. So they're not letting the transaction go through. When your money is on a platform, and this is one of the benefits of using a platform like Bybit, and depending on how you're using it. And I don't want to get too off track, and I want to kind of get going with it forward with the lesson. But if you're using it, especially for trading, and that's what Renee teaches about, USDT is the most common to like be trading in and out, etc., etc. But a lot of people don't like USDT. USDT's had a very bad rap from the beginning. I think it's just kind of first to market, kind of stuck around. I personally don't really have too much of an opinion, although I seem to gravitate towards USDC because of its reputation and what Martin has said is maybe it's being overregulated, but also at the same time, how do we, make sure that these, how do we create, we're going to talk about the blockchain trilemma next week. But how do we create decentralization and then safety? How do we have freedom? How do we, I recently, and this is I'm very big on analogies. There's a series on Netflix called Trainwreck. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it. It's about like Woodstock 99, like all these things that go wrong. And there's a couple of these festivals, like how do we host a festival and have all these people and have a good time without it going terribly wrong and people and violence and scammers and things going on. So in the crypto and the Web3 space, how do we create decentralization in a safe way? And the answer is it hasn't been solved. And this is where we are still in the early stages of the technology development. And I always say to people, when I got into the space, I felt I was super late. I always say to people, if you are you late to the party to put in $100 into Bitcoin and become a millionaire? 100%. That's just not happening, right? Would I recommend putting $100 a week into Bitcoin if you can afford it? 100%. I would still, like, I don't think it's too late to the party, but you're just not going to get rich quick. But in terms of the technology and the development and the governance system and everything that we're going to unpack over the next couple of weeks, and I know we've been on this slide for a while, so I'm going to move on, but I think it's a very important lesson that I learned this week, and I'll always bring those into the classroom because that wasn't in the lesson. Because last week I didn't know that USDT could block transactions, but it is timingly because we're going to talk about Web3 wallets in a moment. But before we move on to Web3 wallets, let's talk about popular exchanges. So I know that we have a global ecosystem. So we have people global and we have people here based in Australia because obviously I'm based here in Australia. So we have a very large ecosystem here. So these are probably the two that I would recommend. So Bybit, which we've obviously partnered with, and they're one of our sponsors of all things blockchain, and we've been working closely with them, but also Binance, Kraken, MXC, and OKX. We actually work with all of them, and that's because these exchanges we believe are trusted. They're the biggest. We call them tier 1 exchanges. Then SwiftX is one of the local exchanges that I recommend that we work with here also. And we've worked with all of those Australian exchanges. So I just kind of like to give a couple of different options. We are, I always say we're chain and exchange agnostic, but those are just kind of the two. Just out of curiosity, is anybody have an account with centralized exchanges? I have like 6, okay? And we're going to talk about that in like the very last lesson. We're going to talk about dollar cost averaging and investing mindset, how you diversify your risk. So I wouldn't keep all my money. I have 2 hardware wallets. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But a lot of people have multiple different exchanges, so or accounts of different exchanges. So I'd be interested to, Martin says too many, who has what accounts. All right, so we've talked about centralized exchanges. Now let's talk about decentralized exchanges, which you'll be heard as a DEX. It will be referred to as kind of as the reference. No middleman, no KYC, which we just talked about. How do they replace that? They use smart contracts, okay, to replace the human intervention. We talk a little bit more in week 7 when we talk about DAOs, okay, and we talk about how are these smart contracts and how are these rules and how are they governed, okay. But basically you replace the banks or these centralized exchanges to basically say, okay, well, Martin has 1 Bitcoin and he's going to give me 1 Bitcoin, and so we replace basically we use the intermediary, so that does that. Now there are no fiat on-ramp and off-ramps. I already talked about that earlier. No customer support, okay? So these are the two things that are probably the biggest barriers of entry to people that are onboarding into the Web3 ecosystem. One, how are you going to get your money? Even if you did want to buy something or if you did want to play, you got to get money on, okay? And then secondly, if you're new and you make a mistake or you don't know what you're doing or you transfer the wrong money, there's no customer support that's going to help you, okay? So, but you can access a lot of tokens that are not listed on big exchanges. And so for some people that have a high risk tolerance, and I ask you to ask yourself, what's your risk tolerance? You know, low, medium, high. We'll talk about that in week 8. But if you have a high risk tolerance, then you might want to, you know, kind of go and take a gamble and buy some tokens off of that aren't on big exchanges, because a lot of the times, and we're not going to talk about that too much today, but it's a big signal if a tier 1 lists this token, because apparently they've done their due diligence and they trust, but then also it's just access to a whole customer base of, say, like millions of people that don't want to create a Web3 wallet, that don't know how to connect to a centralized exchange, but they'll buy the token if it's easy, okay? And we'll talk about that as we go through, but ultimately it is the backbone of DeFi. We do not go into DeFi in this bootcamp, but we will have a lot of different short courses that will be coming. And as I said, this bootcamp is just about giving you the language and the terminology. But essentially, if there was no DEXs, you wouldn't really have DeFi. So some popular ones, Uniswap, PancakeSwap. So I've just kind of picked a couple of different examples from different chains that you can go and play with. However, I personally don't recommend it for beginners. I recommend that you take your time. And if you do want to go and play in that space, I just recommend doing it with a small amount of money to learn, okay? See, even I actually have never used testnet tokens, but just don't go, because it's more for intermediate to advanced. So just take your time, learn the language, educate yourself. So where do you find different cryptocurrencies? Or if you hear of a token, someone's like, oh, have you heard of Berachain? Just out of curiosity, have you guys heard of Berachain? Just put it in the chat if you guys have heard. No? Okay. I don't want to go into too many stories, but I'm getting too many no's. Okay. So Berachain, quick little side note. So say you hear somebody is like, oh, have you heard of Berachain? And you want to learn more about it, or you want to see how it's ranking, or if it's like in the top 100, or like how new it is. Is it pump and dump? Is it a meme coin? Is it a layer 1? Is it a DAO? You can go to a platform. So CoinMarketCap is just the example that I've used. There's also one called CoinGecko. I don't know. I've always gravitated towards CoinMarketCap. It's my personal choice. And I also have like a portfolio. I have their app where I've kind of put in my token allocation, kind of, so I always know kind of where my balance is. So I've always gravitated towards that one. But a lot of people use CoinGecko. But you can go onto here and you can look for it. So I think at the time that I made this slide, there was over like, 9,000 that are just listed on CoinMarketCap, but there could be like, like 100,000 different types of tokens. And this is where you go and you can get information on them. And you can type it into the search bar if you know the name of it, or if you know the handle, and it will show you the exchanges that it's being listed on, both centralized and decentralized. I don't find it super accurate. So like if I go and put in like a token that I know that's listed on an exchange, it doesn't necessarily, but it kind of just lists the top ones. But Berachain, just before we go on to the next slide, I was working for a consultancy, and they're like, we want you to go and research Berachain. And this was maybe about like a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And it resonated with me because there are these Canadian guys that were stoners, and they like had this like NFT collection or something, that they had like these stoned bears, and they launched it. It must have been back like in 2021 with like the NFT craze. and made like a whole bunch of money, but then like actually went and like developed this whole crazy big ecosystem. And then like now they've like, it's insane the ecosystem that they've grown. They're working with partners like Google. Go and do some research on it. But the story resonated with me. It was in testnet for a long time. I haven't been following with it. I don't own any tokens or anything like that. I'm not promoting it, but I just liked the story of how it went from some Canadian dudes, because I'm Canadian, that were stoners that created this like NFT stoner collection that just like made a whole bunch of money. And then they're like, okay, well, let's like actually build an ecosystem. And then it's turned into Barachain. But this is where you'll go to do your research. We talk about a lot about doing research. Okay, so you find a token, you want to invest in it. Somebody tells you you've got to go create an account with a centralized exchange so that you can buy that token. What do you generally need to do? Most of the time with a centralized exchange, not always, depends on, but most of the time, you're going to have ID and proof of address because they need to do KYC. And that's because they have compliance. They probably have to have an AFSL license, and they need to know who they're selling to. Good internet, I recommend that you never do it over public Wi-Fi. Try to always have a very secure network. We've talked about VPNs last week. You need a way to pay for it, okay? So different exchanges will have different ways that you can on-ramp and off-ramp. Some, depending on where you're tuning in from, where it will allow kind of like directly from your bank, where you can deposit and withdraw straight from your bank. Sometimes you have to use a credit card, especially if you're using an overseas exchange. So it will vary, but you definitely need a way to actually purchase the crypto. And then lastly, what we're going to end today's lesson on is the hardware wallet. And I won't go too much into that, but it's recommended, especially if you're going to invest a certain amount of money for a long period of time. Now, as I mentioned, my journey started, my person that onboarded me told me that I had to start with a hardware wallet. So that was the start of my journey. So I highly recommend it to everyone. Okay, great. You've bought some crypto, you've earned some profit. Now you want to spend it. Nowadays, it's a lot easier to spend it, okay? As I mentioned, there's some exchanges where you can withdraw right back into your bank account. Most of the time, it has to be your local exchange. Or you can use a Bitcoin ATM or a crypto ATM. I probably should put crypto. I have one at my corner store, literally just around the corner. Crypto debit cards is probably the most popular way now. So for example, the Bybit card, we've talked about that before. You can have the digital card, you can have the pay card. It's so easy nowadays to be able to spend your crypto compared to it was 5 years ago when I got into the space. And a lot of places, actually, you can pay directly with crypto. For example, you want to go to Token 49, you can pay for your tickets with crypto. There's some platforms. Living Room with Satoshi is probably one of the original Australian companies where you can actually pay any bill. So it's like a BPay where you just send your crypto and they'll pay your bills. Doesn't matter if it's your tax, your rent, your everything. So there are platforms out there. Spending crypto is not hard. It's just about having the crypto or the profits to be able to spend. So, okay, great. How can we earn crypto? Now, as I said to you, we're not going to go too deep into that. Go and do your own research, but I'm just going to plant some seeds for you. And then the last lesson, we'll really kind of talk about like investing and different mindsets and different strategies. But one thing that you can do if you don't have a lot of capital or you have a low risk tolerance and you just want to start learning, there are learning and earn programs. Now, SwiftX, for example, who are one of our partners, they have a learn program. There's lots of exchanges that do this, like Coinbase. I'm sure Bybit. I'm not 100% sure. They all run them at different times, so they're not continuously ongoing. So you do need to be looking into their platforms to see kind of what initiatives that they're offering. I know when I did mine years ago with Coinbase, like when I say years ago, like literally like 5 years ago, there was all these different like mini short courses that were on all these different blockchains, and then you just had to do the quiz and then you would earn. I think I earned like 100 or something dollars in crypto, and I just left it there, and like it like 10x just from learning. I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but there are programs out there, so please go looking for them. They're out there. Any gamers? So one of our partners, Earnscape, if you're a gamer, this isn't actually a game, but they're a platform that partners with games, and they reward you for your data. And then they basically, so like a data broker. I actually spoke to like a DPIN project the other day, but this is more for games. You can play these games, you earn tokens. So that's a way. And then referral and affiliate programs. So a lot of different exchanges offer this, a lot of different programs. Affiliate marketing is nothing new, okay? You may have heard of network marketing, affiliate marketing. Even as we'll be implementing a learn and earn affiliate program. Word of mouth, it is the popular way where you can just get a little bonus. A lot of people, you don't make a huge amount of money, but over the years, if I asked my tax accountant to tell me how much money I earn from affiliate marketing, she probably wouldn't be able to she'd be able to say, this is the amount of dividends that you were paid out with affiliate marketing. But all I ever did was take that and invest it into crypto. So it'd probably be a lot of calculations to figure out how much I was actually up. But for me, it was a low barrier entry into basically kind of reinvesting that money. So some more ways that you can learn and earn, but they're a little bit more advanced. And I definitely don't recommend these for beginners, but I want to plant that seed. Okay, mining and staking. There's different ways that you can kind of participate. In week 7, we're going to talk about DPIN, which is another way. I actually don't have that in here. I should probably add it in the slide. Liquidity mining and yield farming. I definitely do not recommend for beginners, but it is a way that you can earn. And then airdrops and bounties. We talked a little bit about airdrops previously, but this is where people reward you for participating. So for example, Barachain, the other reason why I think Barachain is a little bit impressive is the ecosystem that they built on a test net was insane. Like and then it became so much speculation, and I actually haven't gone and done any and the amount of money that they raised and the way that they marketed it. But then there was all this speculation that if you were building and you were doing and whatever, that you were eventually going to get like a massive airdrop. So these are different ways that you can earn. Bounties can be different. A lot of the times bounties will be more for like bugs or like reporting or things like that. But a lot of the times too, there can be social bounties as well. But these are different ways that you can earn crypto. Now, we're going to talk more about this in the last week, so I'm not going to hammer home too much about it. But always do your own research, okay? You need to learn how you want to interact with the market. Are you an active trader? Are you a hodler? Are you a dollar cost averager? This you need to decide for yourself, and you don't need to know right away. I tried to be a trader and I identified it's not for me. Okay, so I cross between hodling and dollar cost averaging. And a lot of the times that will be dependent on the market and then also my cash flow at the time. But always our due diligence. If you're unsure, go and reach out to a financial advisor, even though I'm not sure if they would be able to advise you on crypto. Go find a crypto financial advisor that has an AFSL license. All right. How do you keep your crypto safe? I just bought a cold card. What's a cold card? Actually, now that we're going to talk about crypto safe, that's good timing. I just wanted to look over and see if we have any. I'd like to know. If you have a link for it, please share it in the chat. Oh, a cold wallet. Oh, like a cold storage. Okay. But it's a card. Yeah, I've been hearing about these. I know there's is it Tandem? So I'm a little bit of like, I started with a ledger, and we're going to talk about this in a moment. And then I bought a treasurer, but I don't like, why do I need another one? And we're going to talk about diversifying. And yes, you do need to diversify. We're not going to talk about it today, but I had a ledger. And then I was like, okay, well, I want to not diversify, sorry, um, mitigate my risk, sorry. And so you don't want to have everything stored in one place. So I got a treasurer, but like now, oh, so you start with a tandem card. So now it's like, okay, well, if I was just coming into the ecosystem, what products would I go with? And we're going to talk about that because you have to think about how you're going to keep your crypto safe. Now, a lot of times, if you don't have your own keys, then you don't own your own crypto. Now we're going to talk about where do you keep your crypto. And so a lot of the times people hear crypto wallet and they think that the crypto is stored in the wallet. Now, when I was getting new, when I was new into the ecosystem, this was like my big aha moment. I was like, what do you mean? Like it just lives in the in my phone, in the app. No, 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 no. The crypto does not live in your wallet. Okay? It lives, I use the word lives, stored, however you want to think about it, on the blockchain that it's native to. Okay? So Bitcoin lives on the Bitcoin network, Ethereum lives on the Ethereum network. The app or the wallet or the user interface, it doesn't matter if it's MetaMask, it doesn't matter if it's Ledger, it doesn't matter if it's Tangem, it doesn't matter anything. It doesn't matter if it's Bybit wallet, it does not matter. It lives on the blockchain, and the wallet that you're using is the way that you communicate to the blockchain. And if you remember my story a little bit earlier when I went on a massive tangent about USDT apparently learning how they block it, I thought, so when this person told me that this wallet that they had the money in was, I thought it was the wallet provider. So I thought if anyone hear about the trucker incident in Canada a few years ago where there was like a massive strike or something like that, and then like people were like funding them with crypto, and it made headline news that the government went to MetaMask, and if you don't know who MetaMask is, we're going to talk about it in a moment, and said to them, we want you to block the transactions. Yeah, okay. So the government could go to MetaMask and say, we want you to block the transactions to those wallets because that's the RCP node. And I don't want to confuse you guys too much, but it's a big learning here, how we communicate, right? So in my opinion, until every single person knows how to run their own node and run an RCP, like if I knew how to create my own node and I could just communicate with the blockchain, we're never going to have true decentralization. But that's just my own opinion. But anyways, they can go and say, we want to block that transaction. But where they, if I have my seed phrase, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, so stick with me, I could just go put it in a Tangem wallet. I could just go put it in a Ledger. I could go put it in Trust Wallet. I could go put it in Bybit wallet. It doesn't matter. But for what I learned today, apparently USDT, and I have not done my homework and I have not done my research yet. I have not gone down the rabbit hole to learn about this, and I was flabbergasted that USDT apparently is blocking a wallet from communicating, right? And then because it apparently no other currency or another chain from my knowledge does that. So need to do some research and understand that. But the main learning that I want you to get here is the app that you're using, whether it's a hard wallet, whether it's a hot wallet, that is just the way that you are communicating with the blockchain, which we need the internet to do. Okay, so what does a wallet do then? I think I've already kind of unpacked after that. It basically just acts as the gateway to you being able to see the money. See, think about it as like, imagine, when you log onto your bank account, um, I'm trying to think of a really good analogy. You can log in, you can see how much money you have, you can see all that. But before online banking, like in the back in the day, you had to have like a little book. Like it's just a way for you to see, okay? But then there's these things called private keys. And this is where the keeping your crypto safe is going to come really, really important, okay? It also allows you to sign and send transactions when we're talking about in the decentralized world. And so when we talked about DEXs and decentralized exchanges, you need a Web3 wallet to interact with DeFi, aka decentralized exchanges, which is why I say that it's not for beginners, but you are going to learn about that. That's one of your practical activities today, is to go, if you haven't or you don't already have a Web3 wallet. And I always recommend to people the first Web3 wallet. Now, my story is a little bit different. I still have my ledger, I still have my seed words, all of that. But if I have created multiple hot wallets, Bybit, MetaMask, Trust Wallet, etc., especially when I was learning, that I don't use today. So just because you create a Web3 wallet today doesn't necessarily mean that you need to transfer a whole bunch of money into it and keep it forever. Okay, so the practical activity, I highly recommend that you do. And in fact, I always say to people, just use it as like your test wallet. And then when you really know what you're doing, then go be like some of the people that are on the call that are, I see some chat going on there, but have gone to that next step and bought a hardware wallet, like a ledger. And that is when you definitely need to be very safe. So that's why we're going to recommend that you create a Web3 wallet with a hot wallet, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But before we get into that, I know I touched on it a little bit already about public and private keys, or maybe I haven't. Maybe that's next week when we talk about blockchains. Yes, it's next week. So we're not going to go too deep in it today, but I want to give you a visual, okay? The public key, and this is actually an example of an old school kind of like paper wallet, which people don't really use very much anymore in the day. And I've never used one, but this is kind of just to kind of give you a visual that the public key is what you would share with somebody to send the money, and the private key is what you would need to kind of like do these transactions. Now, we're not going to go too technical in it. The main thing that you need to know, it uses cryptography. I've mentioned that previously before. And if you're a bit of a nerd and you like to understand how it works, symmetric and asymmetric cryptography, go watch some videos on it. I know it enough to understand what it is. I'm not the best teacher at more technical stuff because it's just not my wheelhouse. But I teach you, what do you need to know? You need to know how to keep your private keys safe, okay? So that is what I'm going to teach you. So what are private keys? AKA seed phrases. So you saw that really long string, okay? So it's called 256-bit. We're not going to go too deep into hashing 256 SHA. If you were to talk to a developer, they would tell you. So 256 is supposed to be the safest. It hasn't there's been no hash collision. Don't ask me to explain to you what a hash collision is, but that basically means where you can have like two of the same thing. And apparently the only thing that is going to be able to break this 256 SHA is quantum computing. That's a whole nother conversation, but basically this long kind of string of numbers is really too hard, to store or remember. So they create it. Don't ask me how they do it, but it converts it into these 12 to 24 simple words. Okay. How they do it, we don't need to know about. What we do need to know is, okay, well, what's the difference between 12 and 24 words? Okay. 12 is very standard for your hot wallets. 24 is that extra layer of security. The more words, okay, the more mnemonic seed phrases. There is something, I think it's like 39 Coleman, Ian 39 Coleman. You can actually go and create your own wallet, okay? If you're a nerd, go nerd out on that. You can go and create it. But the more mnemonic seed phrases, basically, the harder it is to hack, okay? So for example, that's why your ledgers, are 24 seed words. The one thing that is super, 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 super important is the words need to be in the exact sequence. So I have some tips and tricks about keeping your seed phrases safe and what you need to do. But that is it. Storing them and keeping them safe is one thing. But if you don't write down those words correctly in the right order, you're also SOL. Okay? I hope you know what that means. Now, you need to make sure that you back them up, okay, on a piece of paper. A lot of people use these metal engravers. I personally haven't used one yet because I actually ordered one. I actually still have it in my drawer. But they didn't send me like the thing to engrave with, and then I just found I didn't understand it and it was very difficult. So I actually have, and I'll share with you how I store mine, but I use good old-fashioned pen and paper. So how do you back up your private keys? So a lot of the good wallets will prompt you. They will make you write down your seed phrases. And then before they let you go to the next stage, they'll actually make you enter in your seed phrases in the order, but they'll do it like randomly. So like they'll give you all of the words and then you have to like, oh, this one's one or whatever. So it's like a little quiz to make sure that you've actually backed it up properly. Because if you haven't backed it up, that means you could potentially lose your crypto. So sometimes there are some Web3 wallets, especially if you're in the moment, you're trying to do something, you're at an event, they're like, download this wallet, create this. I'm gonna, I've been there. Like when I was with Solana and this guy was like, oh, I'll send you some bonk. And I'm like, oh, what's bonk? He's like, oh, download this wallet. And I was like, okay. And then I just hit skip back up because I wanted to get the free bonk. I didn't want to sit there and write down the words or whatever. Some of them will let you do that, some of them won't, okay? But just know that if you do that, and the guy gives me the free bonk and I don't go back later and actually back it up, and I drop my phone in the toilet and I lose my phone, goodbye crypto. Goodbye my free bonk, okay? So really, really important to know. No seed phrases, no recovery, okay? That's it. I think that's wrong. No recovery, no crypto. Oh yeah, that does make sense. No recovery, no crypto. Not your keys, not your crypto is the biggest slogan you're probably going to hear. So there's nobody that can help you. And don't be like this guy. Has anybody heard of this guy? Has anybody heard this article? That you can click on that and go and read the full article. But this guy had 75, if somebody's good at math, please tell me that what that's worth now. 7,500 Bitcoin on a hard drive that he threw away. And then when he realized how much it was worth, he was trying to, so at the time of this article that I shared, that it says 127 million, or as long as supposedly he was given up trying to buy the apparently he was like trying to pay I can't remember where he lives. I think it was in Wales, somewhere in the UK, trying to get the council to dig through all of like the rubbish or something. But apparently, and I don't understand, I'm in science, but like it would actually be too like bad for the environment to like dig up all of the rubbish and like all of the toxins or things that would go in. So they were like, no. So don't be like him, all right? But apparently, true story if you want to go and have a little bit of a read. So a lot of people, when they start off, they'll quickly put it into their notes. I literally had a friend the other day send me a screenshot of a seed phrase in his notes. I was like, mate, what are you doing? Like, I couldn't believe he's a really smart guy too, very successful entrepreneur, and he has his seed phrases in his notes, and then he took a screenshot of it, and like, I was just like, dude, do not do that. That is like two things that you should never do, okay? So there's a couple of use cases, where people have just, simple, what was this one? This guy, 2 million on a live stream. He had his like seed phrases stored on an Evernote. Okay. So the point of the story is if you want to be your own bank and you want to be in charge of your own crypto, learn how to keep it safe. And I know that the whole paradox of this whole digital ecosystem that we're creating is that the safest way to back up your digital money is with a good old piece of paper. Write it down. All right. Now, there are some tips for how you're going to store that. Duplicate and disperse. Have a couple. So what do I do? What works for me? I've also asked like somebody else that has a lot more crypto than me, and we're not going to talk about multi-sig wallets today, because that's next level future lesson. We might talk about it a little bit next week, but he's got like multiple different ledgers. He has some in a safe, and he's got way more money than I do. So what I do, I'll share with you what I do, but I actually, for years, I just had some in a ledger and I just kept it, safe. I had my seed words written down. Then as I started to kind of accumulate more and more crypto, I was like, okay, well, I really actually need to like, think about this. So, and then I started traveling a lot. So then what I did was I split my seed phrases and I gave half to like my best friend in Canada and then another person that I trusted here, but I only gave each of them half and neither of them know each other, but I trust both of them enough that one of them, like, they're not going to conspire. That was just a system that worked for me. And I said, if anything ever happens to me, you have one half of the key and you have the other half of the key, and it all goes to, and it all goes to my mom or whatever, right? So you have to think about these things, and there are some protocols and that are trying to work on, what about this? What about actually one of the projects that I worked in Dubai with the DFIC courts was creating this digital asset vault, which basically, like, if anything kind of happened, how do you kind of disperse of these if you have your private keys? So you have to think about these things. Then I also, when I started traveling and I was subleasing my apartment, I was like, oh, well, like I need to keep my keys somewhere safe. Like, where am I going to put them? So I now have a safe. And then even one step further, you should laminate it. My like really good friend Ben, I told him because when I was going traveling overseas, he's the smartest person. Now, the two people that I gave my private keys to don't really know crypto, so they probably wouldn't even know what to do with it. So I was like, oh, okay, well, if something bad does happen to me, how are they're going to be like, oh, well, we have these keys. What do we do with it? So then I gave them Ben's number. And so Ben was like going to be the person that would instruct them on what they would have to do with it, right? Because nobody in my family or close friends would know what to do with these private keys. I'm like, what's a wallet and how do we get access to this? How much crypto does she really have if I were to pass away? So you have to think about these things. And he said to me, he goes, he then went and created, because he's the beneficiary. So I told him where the safe was, and he went and created like an account or whatever and got a lockbox. And then he comes to me and he goes, is it laminated? And I was like, no, I know it should be, but it's not. And he goes, well, I asked them, and there is a 5% chance that it will flood because it's in Brisbane, and Brisbane gets floods. And so he's like, go and get your seed phrases and laminate them. So it's actually on my to-do list to go, even though I've taken all of those precautions, the last thing I haven't done is laminated it. So I need to go back, go to the vault, get my piece of paper that has my seed phrases, go to a shop and laminate it and then take it back. Like you might be laughing and be like, oh wow, that seems like a lot of hard work. Well, if you want to be in full control of your assets and your Bitcoin, and you don't want it to be frozen or blocked, because that's what centralized exchanges do, not your keys, not your crypto. So actually the exchange, the centralized exchange, owns your crypto. So never think that if you've bought crypto and it's living on a centralized exchange, you actually don't own it. You're not a custodial of it. So if you want to be custodial of your own crypto and you truly want to be your own bank, you have to go through these. And it's a big barrier to entry. And this is why Web3 is slow at adoption, because a lot of people don't want to do the work or do the effort or invest the time to understand. So I'll remind you again, please never take a photo of your seed phrase, recovery phrase, mnemonic seed, private keys, all different terms, all mean the same things. And please never put them in your phone or leave them on your computer. Just nothing that can be connected to the internet. All right. All right, we are getting to the tail end, but so now you want to think about, okay, well, how am I going to store? Like, what are my different options? I want to be my own bank. How do I now? A lot of the times, people will have soft wallets because they want easy access. So soft wallets will be in your browser extensions. So Bybit has a Web3 wallet, MetaMask, Trust Wallet. MetaMask was one of my actually. ETH wallet, I think it was back then, was my first one. I use all of them. Okay, now MetaMask, I'm not going to go too deep into the differences, but like MetaMask is only Ethereum, so rather than Trust Wallet and Bybit, they're multi-chain. So that basically means that you can interact with different. Now, same with like Ledger and Treasure, they're all multi-chain, so you're kind of storing all of these. Now, we're not going to get too deep into it, but actually the safest way is to have, if you have Bitcoin, that you have a Bitcoin native wallet. If you have Ethereum, that you have Ethereum native wallet. If you have a Solana, then you have a Solana native wallet. If you have Cardano, then you have Cardano. Now, the problem with that is that's 5 different sets of private keys. So 5 times 24, that is a lot to manage. All right. But that is the most secure way. And I actually do know somebody that stores their crypto that way. And I do know somebody that has a computer that is only for crypto, and he never uses it to connect it to the internet other than when he wants to connect his hardware or do transactions. All right. So there's different levels of security. Hardware wallets, we've already talked about those. But the main thing that you really want to, you need to know is your hot wallets are constantly connected to the internet. Now, Ledger has Ledger Live. I could log in right now on my computer, and like it has the user interface that I can actually see what assets I have in there, how much it is, but I can't transact. I actually have to have the physical device to be able to sit in there and actually do the transactions, rather than the hot wallet. It's just in the browser. If I want to quickly do a transaction, I can be anywhere. It doesn't matter. So I had to think about these things when I was starting to travel. I went like on like a 6-month travel, and I'm like, oh, what happens if the bull market and we're at blow off top and I want to sell some of my crypto? Do I want to carry my ledger around with me? Do I want to carry my seed phrases with me? First world problems, I really had to think about this. So these are the types of things that you really need to be thinking about. Paper wallets, I gave you a little example. Most people don't use paper wallets. They're a little bit old school, but I'm sure they are still around. So different hot wallets, Bybit, MetaMask, Phantom is Solana. If you are on Solana, I remember I told you I was in Dubai and I met these guys and I was hanging out with the whole Solana ecosystem. They have this like Nas house and I was learning. This is probably like a year and a half ago. I had some soul, but like I didn't. Oh, really? Phantom now does BTC and ETH. I did not know that. Thank you, Roseanne. This is what I love about this peer-to-peer learning. But I remember saying to them, they're like, "Oh, do you have Solana?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I have it. I'm holding it, right?" So I'm like, "It's on my treasure that's at home." And then the guy was like, "Download the Phantom wallet so that he could like transfer me bonk or something like that." I can't remember exactly the story. But I thought it was annoying because I had to download another wallet rather than if you use like Bybit, which might be multi-chain or Trust Wallet or whatever, you can have multiple. And like Roxanne is now saying that they can have Bitcoin and ETH. So it really kind of just depends. Different wallets have different functionality, and they basically just allow you to interact with these different ecosystems. Hardware wallets, we've already talked about Trezor Ledger. There's many of them out there. These are probably just the two kind of most long-standing. There's lots of them out there. Go and do your research. As some of the other peers in the classroom have shared their, what was it? That was the new one. I know there's Tangem, Crypto Night. There's a whole bunch of them coming out. My only recommendation is for you to do your research on how safe they are. Now, what do? I just go to people that are smarter than me and ask kind of like, "Oh, what do you think of kind of the technology?" Now, yes, Ledger has had some hacks, but not necessarily hacks in terms of the technology. They've just had like their database breached, okay? And then there's things like phishing attacks that have happened, and we talked about those last week. But go and do your homework. It's also about how many coins they store, how easy the user interface, how easy it is. My ledger is like the one that's on there. It's like so old school, and like the new ones, like they have a nice user interface. So really just go and do your homework, go and do your research. Yes, always buy from the manufacturer. Yes, it's a very, 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 very good point. Always be very, 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 very safe with it, because people can, manipulate them. So always make sure that you're buying from a reputable source. So the number one thing, I don't really care what platform, what Web3 wallet, what exchange, what hardware wallet that you use, just know if it's not your keys, it's not your crypto. So yes, we might recommend exchanges like Bybit to use to trade, to facilitate. I think it's great if you're earning and spending in crypto. Now I get paid in crypto, so it's great to have my Bybit card and good to spend on it. Would I keep $100,000 on my Bybit card? No. Would I keep $5,000 or $10,000 for spending money or paying business expenses? Yes. So just diversify your risk. Just know I also wouldn't probably keep a large sum of money only in one bank. I have multiple banks now that I think about it. In Australia, I have three, and then in Canada, I have two. So, like, I don't have all of my assets in one bank. Why would I have all of my assets in one exchange or one wallet? Okay, and we're going to talk about more about that in the last week. So I know that was a lot of information, but I prepared you information overload. Next week, we're going to be talking about the differences between different chains. What is the difference between Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana? what are the, consensus mechanisms and behind all of that, because that kind of goes into that next layer. You need to understand how to stay safe and all that, which I think we've covered. We've talked about crypto scams. We've talked about how to keep your crypto safe. But now, in order for you to really kind of make educated decisions on any type of investments that you're going to make, you need to understand the differences between the chains and what is the differences between them, what's the different use cases, what are some of the limitations. So that's where the do your own research is, understanding the differences between them. And it can be very complicated, and we'll talk more about that next week. As always, if you have signed up, or you can sign up if you are watching this recording and we have didn't know, if you get the Bybit, if you deposit $100 USDT into there, you get 20 USD dollars USDT that you can use to spend. And you don't necessarily have to use the Bybit card. We just like to say to people, we just like to show you how easy it is, that if you go ahead and do that, that you get those rewards. So practical activity, every single week, you're going to get one. If you have not done so already, go and practice creating a hot wallet. I always recommend starting with a hot wallet, especially if you're very, very new. So you can go in, we've got instructions in there. The PDF, as always, will always be shared in the group. As soon as we jump off this call, I upload all of the resources there in for you, and they're also in the drive. So that's your practical activity for the day. If you already have a hardware wallet or a cold store wallet, and you're like, I've kind of gone through that process and I've already learned about that, make sure that you test your knowledge. But then I recommend that you go and do some research on some of the things that we talked about. Can USDC block transactions? How public is it that USDT can block these transactions? This industry is continuously evolving. I am shocked. So the other thing that I'll finish the story on, and this story will be a continuously ongoing story. So I messaged the guy, and so I know somebody that knows somebody that apparently helps people that have this situation, that either get hacked or get blocked or whatever, and it's usually always with USDT, to recover the funds. And then she said what they do is they actually work with the law enforcement, because apparently it's the law enforcement that is saying to USDT, you have to block these. We've identified these addresses as criminal activity, so you must put a block. Now, I have not done my homework or my research. I'm just telling you what somebody shared with me, and this is like literally 2 days ago. But apparently, this guy, I guess, has done this this is what he does for a living. So when this happens, if you are so-called innocent, this guy helps you recover your funds. And it's not so cheap. But yes, thank you so much, Erin. Thank you, Pat. I hope that you all learned a lot. But yes, get stuck into your learning activities. I hope that you all enjoyed tonight's lesson. As always, if anybody has any questions, stick around. I'm just going to end the recording. We can jump into any questions or comments or concerns that you have. And please, the last thing that I will ask is to provide us feedback so that we can make the lessons, the platform. As I mentioned to you previously, we're building out the LMS, we're building out extra courses for you. So it's just going to continuously grow and evolve, and we'd love your feedback on how we can make it better. So thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening.